Welcome to Loyola University Chicago's Be the Change Implementation Science Seminar Series. The Parkinson School of Health Sciences and Public Health, Loyola University of Chicago, in partnership with the Institute for Translational Medicine, offers monthly seminars to promote implementation science to improve translational science and health outcomes. Our guest speakers are researchers and practitioners in implementation and dissemination. From different lenses, we will learn about theory and use cases.
I am delighted to introduce a good friend of mine, Meredith Smith, who's with us in person today here in Chicago at Loyola's campus and virtually with all of those in our IT network. She's going to be talking with us today, her experience in mixed method designs as we think about large-scale hybrid effectiveness and implementation studies, lessons from the field. So I think it's useful to provide a little bit of feedback. Meredith is with a healthcare consultancy within Thermo Fisher Scientific. She's the senior director and head of the implementation science group at Evidera PPD. And this implementation science team is currently among the largest in the business, consulting with biopharmaceutical and biotechnology industries, government, and nonprofit organizations globally. So Dr. Smith has a unique background. She's trained as a health services researcher, but has 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, where working in scaling up and addressing to improve health outcomes, the intersection of implementation science with regulatory policy and drug safety. That's where I got to work with and know Meredith. And thinking about this as it relates to the safe and appropriate use of medicines. But she also brings academic experience, having been on faculty at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and Mount Sinai in New York, also having collaborated with Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She currently also serves as adjunct faculty at University of Southern California and their School of Pharmacy. She's recognized also as a fellow in the International Society for Pharmacoepidemiology. So it's a very interesting, I think, cross-section between the science of implementation, but needing to operate at scale, national and large units of analysis under highly regulated environments. And so with that, we're going to see what creative solutions and what you've learned. So thank you.
Great. Yes. Thanks so much for the introduction and the welcome and the invitation. Thank you, Nellie and Fran and others here at Parkinson School for this opportunity. So my goal today is to make this very informal, and I really welcome questions as we go along or comments, observations. I'm here eager to learn from you as much as you maybe care to learn from me today. So, I think Elaine's done a really nice job in terms of kind of giving us a background on where I'm coming from. As Elaine mentioned, I currently am at Evidera. We have a very new team there that does implementation research. I joined the company in August of 2022, and the team was just starting to coalesce and build and come together. We'd had a few implementation science projects that predated my arrival, but beginning in August, we started really kicking into high gear and have been receiving a number of RFPs and dealing. We have we do focus primarily on work for biotech and biopharma. We also, though, however, have some grants with different governmental agencies as well as nonprofits. So it's kind of cover the spectrum. That's but biotech and biopharma is our main focus. So just to give you that background, and to the best of our knowledge, we are the biggest such implementation science team in the area, in the field. There's one other group that does implementation science from a higher perspective, but they are focused mostly on government work. So they do a lot of work for the government, different governmental agencies. So So it's been a really interesting experience to kind of get this team going. And I do want to just have a shout out to a much valued colleague here, Win, who is working for us. She was an intern coming through the school here, and our good fortune to have her as an intern first. And she was also the first implementation science scholar in our group. So, and then we were able to hire her in the fall last year, and she's been, as I say, a much valued, much respected member of the team. So, so glad you could make it here today. So anyhow, as my title suggested, I was going to share with you some of our experience to date in conducting what are called the hybrid effectiveness implementation studies. I'm sure all of you in the audience here today are familiar with that terminology. This is three types actually of different designs that Kern et al. Had proposed, including hybrid type 1, which is where you test the clinical intervention while gathering information on the implementation approaches. Type 2 is where you're testing the clinical intervention and you're also studying the implementation strategy. And then hybrid type 3 is where you're testing the implementation strategy, looking at implementation outcomes in particular, while gathering information on clinical intervention. To date, we've done primarily 1s and 3s. I'm not sure if we've done any 2s yet, but I think the key takeaway point here is that these types of hybrid studies are being embarked upon increasingly by pharma companies. And it's usually in that phase 3B, phase 4 period where they're deciding to invest in conducting this type of research and gathering this type of data. Now,
so our audience may not be so familiar with phase 1, 2, 3 nomenclature. Maybe a quick primer for us.
Okay. So if you look at the schematic here on the screen to the far left, that's in the development life cycle for new medicines. That's your preclinical, the basic research where you're looking at the mechanisms of action and understanding the chemical structure, et cetera, and then testing in animals. Phase 1 is when you first bring it into humans. It's healthy humans. It's a very small group of people. And then phase 2 is when you're testing it in the indicated or the target patient population, but again, in a very small amount, usually doing some dose ranging studies there. And then phase 3 is where you have larger trials, larger size, much larger sample size. And again, you're testing it in that indicated population that you're interested in getting approval in. Then there's this kind of period between phase 3 and phase 4, often called phase 3B. And that's when you have submitted your marketing authorization application and you are waiting to hear, you may be negotiating with a regulatory authority at that point, but and usually the sense is that it will get approved. And now you're anticipating how you're going to actually roll the product out into the marketplace. And then phase 4 is when you're looking at the drug in the real world being used by real world prescribers and in a variety of real world settings with often a range of patients that will most likely be somewhat different than your target, than the group used in clinical trials, just because of trial inclusion, exclusion criteria. So that's that. So this idea of using these hybrid study designs to support the uptake, adoption, and sustained use of a new innovation. In this case, is really often the innovation is the drug itself or a new type of clinical care process or new approach to delivering the therapeutic regimen. So when we think about implementation science, you always want to know what the intervention is. In this case, I will give an example of one that we fairly recently completed, and it's more complex. It's not only were we interested in understanding the uptake of the then the product among patients. We were also wanting to understand the uptake of the strategy to support the uptake of the product into clinical care. And for that, we were looking at interviews and surveys with providers at the site and site administrators and site staff. So I think this it can get super complex, and as I'll mention in a few more slides, it's sometimes even the sponsor's not clear on what's the intervention that is of most interest. So, but on the whole, the other point I really wanted to make with this slide is that the use of implementation science in general and hybrid trial designs in our hybrid study designs in particular is really nascent in drug development right now. We're just starting to see. The sense is there's increasing slowly awareness that this is really valuable. This can really help us when we get onto the market, and information about that we can gather in this way. It's really going to be valuable. And some of the regulators are similarly beginning to be interested. The lady that's familiar, FDA in particular, and as well as the European Medicines Agency, both been more in the forefront on the drug safety side, but I don't think it'll be long before we start seeing it on more effectiveness, efficacy, clinical side as well. So of this, so just a little bit more about us, this team of implementation researchers at Evidera. To date, we've done 7 hybrid effectiveness implementation studies. So this is roughly since predating me a little bit, 2021, probably beginning of 2021 to date. So these are big trials. Studies. This is quite a large workload. We sometimes partner with we're actually a wholly owned subsidiary of Thermo Fisher Scientific. So we are actually nested into PPD, that's Pharmaceutical Product Development Company, which is a large clinical research organization. And so we often partner with them on these types of trials. So they handle the clinical ops part of it all, and we do the implementation science piece. But not always. Sometimes we partner with another CRO. So, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the impact of the partnering process on that front too. HIV treatment regimen has been the focus of most of the studies we've done today. It seems that for one reason or another, the whole area of HIV treatment has been very appreciative of the value of implementation science research. So you really have individuals there in that research space who are using implementation science. So it's really kind of penetrated there. Surprisingly, not as much we're seeing in terms of the oncology side for new oncology products, although it is NIH and the NCI that's really driving a lot of the thought leadership in terms of implementation science in the United States. But I do believe that we will see that more and more as it kind of filters through, because there's some of the really exciting new types of oncology therapies are really complex, and some of them need to be tailored, like the CAR Ts. They have to be tailored to the individual. And so understanding about what it will take to get uptake and adoption, sustained use of these kinds of treatment regimens will be very important. We've done studies really kind of in most of the major regions across the world at this point, and in a large number of sites. One of the big studies that we're currently working on now is 65 sites across the globe. And the healthcare provider sample sizes, again, range, but on the high side, it's been 150. And then the patient participant sample sizes have also ranged a bit from 100. And then this big study that Bea and I are both on now is 420 patient participants. So it's a big study, they're large. And like all implementation studies, they're multi-level. So we're looking at patients nested within settings, and then patient providers within settings, which are then within different regions and countries and regions of the world. So we have been nested. And our other signature approach is always to use mixed methods when we think about collecting and certainly when we're analyzing the data. One other, just a word about the types of strategies. So very, very interesting. We've seen a real range of different types of strategies that sponsors, and by that I mean the company that's paying for the study, is using, and is interested in seeing if they work. And some of them are, I think we would maybe actually debate if it's really a strategy or not. And that again kind of speaks to the fact that implementation science is developing, and sometimes some of the terminology and definitions are a little squishy. And so, but one study has been looking at a new clinical care delivery package. Without doubt, that's an implementation strategy. It's trying to what is it that care providers need in order to be able to carry out and deliver this new regimen, consistently, reliably, appropriately to patients. Others, facilitation, that's a well-recognized type of strategy, implementation strategy. But then some other ones we have currently also doing some new, using new different types of digital technology to collect additional study data on patients. You could argue or not that that's an implementation strategy for the use of the therapy. Potentially, it could be viewed as therapy, as a strategy, in that maybe post-market or outside of the study context, clinicians might want to encourage their patients to, for example, wear a watch, wearable that collects certain physiological data on an ongoing basis, and then monitor the data such as physical activity or sleep quality or things like that as indicators of how well they're progressing on the therapy. That could arguably be. Other one that we're using now is what we call an e-diary. That is, individuals are prompted at different intervals to enter information around their water intake, their stress level, their mood, their alcohol intake. So again, you could argue that potentially could be used to monitor patients or not. But what we're trying to do is understand, will patients, use these strategies? What's the, on our consent form, how many actually agree to use it? And then how many actually do use it? After they consent, do they actually, once they see what it looks like or what it entails, do they actually carry through with it? And then how long do they stay with it for the course of the study? So that kind of drop-off rate is another area of interest to us. So a lot of diversity on that front. So I mentioned a little bit about, we partner with both the sponsor and then often some other large group that does the clinical trial operations piece. And so in this kind of matrix type approach to running these trials, we've encountered a number of types of challenges, and I've kind of bucketed them here for the purpose of today's discussion. And one of them is ethics committee review. And this is something we've seen, particularly in Europe, a variety of different countries there, where we get feedback from the ethics committee. We don't understand why qualitative data are being collected. Why are you doing interviews particularly why are you doing interviews with staff sites? Staff. Like, what's that? What's that about? And you could argue, I was first really surprised that we would get this, not because I thought it was outside the purview of the ethics committee review. They're supposed to look at protection to human subjects, right? But I see it also, one way you can view it is are you making the study unnecessarily burdensome? And so I think it's from that perspective, and they're saying, why are you asking these questions in this way? And what is qualitative research anyhow? And it's really not research, doesn't really count in our book. So as we have gotten that, and then there's some variations on why consent staff and healthcare professionals. So some misunderstanding about their role as actual participants in the study versus part of the study team in terms of delivering the trial. So just to
hear that for these ethics committees, are they the kind that
if you're a sponsor, you can go to for rapid review of your trials? What kind of ethics review are they?
So these are at the country level. Usually, I'm thinking of ones in Europe, and that's a really good question. I would I think it's PPD in our case in the studies that I've been involved in that selects the ethics committee. We have a whole ethics review division kind of, and they are the ones. And I think it's based on ones they've worked with to date. So I don't know if they're definitely most familiar with RCTs.
Yes.
So this is a new animal as far as they're concerned. Yeah.
So this folks online are listening. So this seminar is in the context of a clinical translation research site, in which we're also now supposed to start focusing on common roadblocks to translational science and research. And I think it doesn't take very many people to realize, working with your ethics committee and IRB for review, and I know certainly in trials for a company, that's a huge, how fast can you get through?
Yeah.
So I was just curious around that, whether or not we experience it here if you're trying to do a certain community-based trial and you're working with an ethics review that's more familiar with RCTs in a hospital. Maybe, does anyone have good strategies on how to best get IRBs up to speed on different trial designs like this? I don't want to put you on the spot, Frank, because your voice is bad, but I mean, at the VA, it's got to be a common problem too, or had been. Maybe you've solved it.
The VA's been doing implementation science research for over 20 years now, so it's taken a while to educate them on this, but over time, it's become pretty accepted.
Right. So any insights around what was done to help them other than the pain of going through 20 years of experience?
A lot of education, talking to people. I don't know that there was any way that we kind of sped through any of it. There's a lot of early pains in the process.
Yeah. I think I see you, Sean. Are you on? The work that you've done in health outcomes research at your institution, have you encountered difficulties, with the IRB reviews? Or he wasn't there? Oh, I thought I saw him. Okay. This is a common problem in academics, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And I'm
Sure.
And I don't know how others do it other than it's through relationship development with the IRB.
Well, we've been gathering lessons learned.
Yeah.
We've been gathering lessons learned, and actually, one of our clients is so tired of dealing with ethics committees and writing responses that we've kind of collaborated, and we're hoping to publish something on, like, a white paper commentary on it, because you get it into a clinical journal so that we are hitting the right audience. I'm just not sure, given the variety of different ethics committees throughout Europe, what single journal some of these professionals on those boards read. But anyhow, our goal is to get something out there just to kind of begin that educational process. So,
well, we would be eager. Let us know when that's published, because
disseminate it.
No, I mean, it's a common thing. People get trained on looking at kind of study design. And it's hard to suddenly say, oh, there's a new study design. How do we interpret?
Yeah.
Sorry, could I chime in here? I was just wondering, this is Bamidele anyway. So you did mention that, some of these studies are, overseas in other countries. How is the experience like? For example, we have an implementation science funded project going on in Nigeria, and we finished one in Ghana. The experience is that, in terms of the RB, it depends on whether it is the national organization, RB organization that is handling that, or the academic located RB, but the important thing is the education also. For those that have many sites within the country, usually that is done at the national level, in addition to the ones that, the peers or site peers who do at the various academic centers. So I was wondering if you could mention or say something about your experience regarding other countries that you had to, work in.
Yeah, we have. We've seen some distinct differences across Europe in terms of how different countries. And I don't have enough detail on. I think some of these are country level IRPs, and others aren't. Some of them, I guess, it depends on like the sites. Maybe in some cases, I don't have that level of detail on them. But for example, it's not to be negative. We've had a lot of problems with France for some reason. I don't know. and not just the couple studies I've been working on, but kind of historically, apparently, with this particular client, they go, oh, France again. So I mean, it's something about super vigilant about patient privacy and protection of subjects, but coupled with a real lack of familiarity with qualitative research. So, and also just some of the questions that implementation science research poses, they just don't get it. They just don't understand what value ultimately that has. We should be looking at the drug. We understand about the drug and testing the drug, but asking about the site and how the site's organized, and clinical care is delivered, and strategies. What is that? So yeah.
So your studies, the implementation science, is often the add-on to already a trial that is happening. So
they're true hybrid.
Okay.
So they are coming. It is all born together. Although there is a bit of you could say a little bit of preeminence given to the clinical team. And the clinical, the person who leads it, both from the sponsor side and from our side, are the clinical leads, and they too need education about the implementation science piece. So this particular client I'm talking about is one of the very few, at least in big pharma in the industry, that has the actual implementation science group within the company. That's like really, really unique. And so you'd think that there, at least, the word has gotten out and they understand, what's up with this type of research. But their clinical colleagues are often not as comfortable or familiar with that. And you should chime in. You have lots of great comments. You should be sitting under the table too. Come sit up.
But with France in particular, they have some very, very rigid laws around libel and privacy, and I think it would vary country to country based on their their basic law structure and also the ethos of the country.
Yeah. No, I'm just reflecting on what you also said, Bamadelli. I mean, so I would imagine many of those studies are coming at it from the lens of a public health, a community engaged research, and so those people understand this work very well. I mean, that's where these methods came from. Whereas here you're coming through more like the pharma trial design side. I guess it's cultivating and understanding which IRBs to work with. You have a choice.
Yeah. Well, the IRBs I believe, are selected by our partner PPD, at least in the couple of trials I'm thinking of. And so they're definitely RCT type. That's what they're familiar with. Yeah. And so, but and then similarly, we found variations across site and site staff where healthcare professionals at the site themselves don't see the value of this. They don't want to participate. They're too busy. They say that's the more I guess, polite response. Sometimes we get like, just don't see the value of this, and I've got other things to do with my day. And so, so we have encountered that. Again, there's some real differences by country and region. Could not understand, but it could be cultural too. There may be some cultural factors going on, and then they don't understand some of the IS, kind of some of the fundamental constructs or concepts from implementation science. And so that's where you have to be super careful. The jargon gets in the way. We know what that happens. So, and then I mentioned a little bit about the sponsor and the clinical operations group. One other this probably point is worth mentioning is there is when we work with sponsors, what we've seen to date, and this is a real growth opportunity for us, is that they may or may not have a framework in mind. And we all know that's one of the hallmarks of implementation research is your framework or choice of one or more frameworks to use in your research. And they may not have one in mind, or they have one, but they're not clear. They have no rationale really. And if you probe, it may be, oh, that was the one I used in graduate school, and I really like that one, and I understand it. And maybe, and that's all fine and good. It may not be super, may not fit the circumstance super well. And so then there gets to be, some retrofitting that has to occur as the study goes on. So that's a real opportunity for us. Is we're starting to think about how we can be more proactive and engage with the client early on before that framework gets selected, to really help them think through, go through some steps together to think through what might be one or more frameworks that would be appropriate in this instance, and then to work with them to apply that. And then similarly with the intervention strategies, like I say, it can be rather murky what they're thinking of as a strategy, why that's a strategy, and how that differs from the intervention. So these are all areas, and we're very much a work in progress as well, in terms of learning to work with these clients and helping them learn as well. So let's just make a little transition, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the focus on using mixed methods in these hybrid trials or hybrid studies. And then as I think you may know, there's usually kind of 4 methodological issues when you're thinking about using a mixed methods approach. There's what's your topic, a research question you're trying to address, whether or not mixed methods will lend itself to that research question, your theory or framework, or theories and frameworks that you're using. You're thinking about the methods, how you're going to mix the methods, and then the data itself, the data collection approach you're going to use. So those are the 2 topics. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the theory framework piece. I do have, in a couple of these slides, I have some citations that are there just for reference if people are interested in learning more about the particular topic, for reference. These are some ones that we've learned. So in terms of the framework, I think several of us in our group just finished a scoping review that looked at the use of implementation science theories, models, and frameworks in implementation research for medicinal products. And this review, we took it back to 74 and through 2022. What we found was there's a lot of publications out there in which implementation science research has been conducted involving medicinal products, but it quickly comes to the number of relevant studies for our purpose quickly dwindled down to 9. And the reason it did is because we were focusing on the use of TMFs, theories, models, and frameworks. And what we found is, because we were doing a scoping review, you have to rely on the title or the abstract in your first cut as you're screening the articles. And studies again didn't include mention of either in either the abstract or the title. And so we know there's a there's a large number and a growing number of studies involving medicinal products as the intervention using implementation science. It just are not reporting on this. So that was one of our big findings from that. And then the other is that most of these studies have been published fairly recently, since 2020. Most of them had fewer than 50 participants, although there were of this 9. And then all of them were focusing on the post-marketing period. So this type of implementation research is really focusing on how are we getting uptake and adoption and sustained use in that post-approval time period. So, and you could argue that that's a little late. Guys, we could think about earlier when you're even planning your phase 3 trials. You might want to do that, because that's going to be so helpful for you in so many ways, from your commercial strategy to, thinking about, how you're going to roll out your medical science liaisons. And so again, not a big surprise. The most frequently used TMF was the CFR, Consolidated Framework for Implementation Research. That was not a huge surprise. And then the other finding was that TMF use was limited mostly to either instrument development. So you're using the framework to guide you in developing like your survey, and or in the qualitative analysis phase, so that when you're doing that thematic analysis. So I just want to have a shout out to the fact that in the medicinal product space, they're not using the quality reporting standards, and you guys are all familiar with the STARI, the standards for reporting implementation studies, but that has an item that specifically says you should cite your framework and that you used in your abstract or your title, or in your keywords. And, they're not doing that yet. So that's an area of improvement that needs to. And then just kind of continuing that theme around benchmarking of what's considered, or is a growing consensus about what is good practice in terms of implementation research in the use of frameworks. I was able to find this one study that this was by Kirk et al. It was a systematic review of the use of the CFR to date. Now this came out in 2016, so it isn't the most, it's not right hot off the press by any means, but it was the only one I could find that could use as a comparison with how we're progressing. And I'm again using we in the kind of royal we sense of those researchers in medicinal product development space, how we compare to more broadly the use of frameworks in implementation research and public health more generally. So in the CFR systematic review showed that researchers were only reporting a rationale for the choice of the framework or the constructs in 13% of the studies. That's quite small, are providing an explicit rationale for why they chose that framework or constructs. Formal assessment of the comparative salience of each construct, which again is recommended, and these recommendations are coming out of like Dan Schroeder et al. Article back in 2009 on the CFR when it was first developed. That's not being reported. Formal determination of the level which each construct should be defined and measured, whether that's individual, team, the clinic level, whatever, not reported. Formal rationale for the time points at which measurements will take place, not reported. Application of the framework to guide data collection, only not even 20%. We're using the framework to guide data collection. Application of the framework to guide data analysis, that's where you're seeing 54% in the CFR studies. And then investigation of outcomes, using the constructs as predictors of implementation effectiveness outcomes in models, regression models, or as control variables, which I think is such an exciting direction to go in, but only 42% in the CFR studies. And you can see in the final right-hand column how our studies to date we have not, today we've inherited the framework, so to speak, when we walk into the study working with the client, and we want to, that's an opportunity for us as a growth approach to make the study more rigorous. So again, we have not, we are looking at the comparative salience of each construct, but to form a formal determination of the level at which has not always been done consistently, nor the time point. So this is where the complexity of doing this clinical study as part of with the implementation research is. It's often the clinical team that dictates the data collection time points. And then, we have to think through like how we're going to fit that. So the key, the readout, when the primary endpoint is going to be evaluated. So we have to think through. Well, when would it be good to have assessments to fit around that? So it's not done at a equal parity. Like truly, we think these are of equal value. So let's have a discussion around it.
So I would imagine even if you did have more wave your wand ability, the precedent of, well, we always do it in 0, 3, 6, 12 months. Why would you do it at 2? Even if you could create it from scratch, right? Don't you think everyone, that's been my experience.
Well, though maybe a client by client type thing to set the precedent. Yeah.
Right. But their medical affairs or clinical affairs people are grounded in like all studies have these.
Yeah. Right. Yep.
I just want to give a little editorial. I mean, for part of this is to guide people in preparedness for their own grantsmanship. And this is an excellent checklist if you're writing a grant, involves implementation science. You just need a sentence or two to describe each of the A through G to raise your game with study section reviewers. And it's often missed in academic proposals as well.
Oh, nice context. Nice context. Great.
So and the ones that do it all get the better scores. Right. It doesn't, it just takes a little intentionality.
So it's aspirational for us too. And so, but anyhow, this is, we feel good in that we are using frameworks and we're getting more sophisticated in different ways of using frameworks. We have not yet done the modeling, and I think that's the next frontier. Really exciting. So other challenges, just briefly, one of them is, and again, this may be familiar to all you guys, the standard measures may or may not be available depending on the framework selected. So you have to come up with your own questions. So we all know CFR is got this great website where they have all sorts of measures developed. You go through and pull out the ones that are relevant for you. I think PRISM has done that as well now, and EPIS does too, I think. Yeah, but not others. So you have to think about that too. And then the some of the standard implementation outcome measures like the AIM, the FIM, the IM, they have really poor measurement qualities. They're just not very sensitive, and they're so generic to be almost useless. And when you're using them, so that those are the other challenges. So little segue here into one particular study that we did. Sorry, it seems to be a little cut off there at the top, but it's what we call the carousel study. This was the cabotegravir RPV. This is highly effective antiretroviral 2-drug regimen. This was a study conducted in Europe, as the title suggests. And it was really focused on how to optimize the delivery of this 2-drug regimen in the form of a long-acting injectable from the perspectives of both people living with HIV, healthcare professionals at the sites where this treatment is available and delivered, and the healthcare system itself. And again, because it was looking across Europe, there are, as you all probably familiar, there are differences across Europe in terms of the healthcare system. There's some variations. So we have that as a kind of a third tier in our multi-level research here. It was a hybrid 3 type study. with IS primary endpoints, implementation outcomes. There were 72 site staff that participated and 450 patient participants, and it was a year in duration, 12 months, and there were 18 sites across 5 countries in Europe. And so in preparation for the study, the company had done some some background research and knew that the HIV care sites across these 5 countries kind of all fell into one of 3 different archetypes. So the first one was sites with an existing hospital-based HIV care model, and these sites have been identified as having reluctance to shift towards community care. So this kind of outpatient delivery, injectable delivery, due to concerns over feasibility, or a view that HIV care needs to remain in a specialist setting. So from a company's perspective, if you're thinking of how we can expand the accessibility to this product at a country level, we want to get a variety of types of sites. So if countries are heavy in one of these particular models of care, we want to think what are the barriers to overcome to expand to different healthcare settings and improve accessibility. Archetype 2 were sites who provided HIV care privately with varying levels of public reimbursement, and these were in semi-specialized physicians' offices located in primary care settings, and there was some knowledge about their being somewhat variable in terms of their acceptability of having injection facilities. So the drug was really, it was an injection delivered by a healthcare professional. So you had to have specialists to do that, or a special team to do that. And then the third archetype was sites who've been identified as having a stretch capacity in existing HIV settings. They also were identified, they were big on having the care delivery to focus on patient convenience as much as possible, both in terms of location and availability of appointments, and then but did not currently offer HIV treatment. So these were kind of the 3 big buckets. And the study design itself, from the site staff participant, it was a 2-arm, unblinded, non-interventional study. It was cluster randomized at the country level. And then sites within a country were randomized to either the standard arm or, and this is where the strategies come into play, the enhanced implementation arm. So the enhanced implementation arm is defined here as increased level of provider support, so that we provided face-to-face meetings with them, trainings, and additional touch points around their adoption of this new injectable approach to administering this long-acting 2-drug HIV regimen. The traditional care approach in the what we call the Arm S sites was just let the provider deliver the injection without any specific additional support other than what the company would have done normally, which is to send out a medical science liaison and some product materials, and explain at a lunch and learn or something like that. So that was the contrast. And then for patient participants, however, the study was single arm. It was unblinded, but it was an interventional study where patients were screened for eligibility and then assigned to receive a 2-drug regimen. So it was this long-acting injectable, so that it reduced the need for them to, it's in contrast to like a daily oral pill. They only had to take this periodically. I'm trying to remember if it was monthly or every other month or something, but it was much less frequent. So the data collection included patient and provider surveys, questionnaires, interviews, and then there was also provider group calls. So you can see here the time points. There are multiple time points across the 12-month period, 4 time points for the patient and staff surveys, 2 time points, month 1 and month 12 for the patient interviews, and month 1, month 5, and month 12 for the site staff interviews. And there was also focus on understanding adaptation. So the Frame IS, which is the tool to help guide data to understand and measure adaptations in a systematic way, was also used. There was a focus on that. And then these continuous quality improvement calls, which were intended to bring together sites in the intervention arm to, in the strategy support arm, to talk about their experience and to learn from each other and share some emerging best practices. The mixed methods approach we used here was a quantitative and qualitative, the quant plus qual kind of notation style. Neither was superior, so you don't see one capped. And the rationale was really convergence, the idea that the data would be brought together in terms of like complementarity. We could bring this data so it can, the quant provides a certain type of information, the qual other, and then you bring it together to get a fuller picture. But you need to have some congruence in the measures and the topics that you're focusing on with this type of approach. So that's the quant qual, which, so again, a good citation from Aaron's et al. There about that. So just some examples of the data, the questions asked in Carousel. The surveys would use the closed-ended quantitative like ratings, and for patients it was ratings of acceptability, feasibility, and appropriateness of taking the study drug as delivered in the clinical setting. Whereas in the interviews we would be probing why, to what extent they felt it was acceptable, how, in what ways was it feasible and appropriate, and barriers they encountered. For site staff, it was around the surveys we'd have like a closed-ended list of barriers, and then ask them questions. And I believe the SEM, the AIM, and the INM were also used, but it was focused on their delivery of this injectable, but also focus on gathering some information about the strategy in the arm that was exposed to the strategy. So here's another way of looking at the design. This is more graphic, but you could see in the green, it's quantitative data collection. And then we went from there and did the quantitative data analysis. So that was separate from the qualitative data analysis, mostly quantitative data analysis in the form of descriptive statistics, the qualitative data collection, and then these were kind of semi-structured interviews, and then we did the qualitative data analysis, and then we did the coding and thematic analysis, and then we did the approach of integration. There's for those of you who perhaps are continuing to familiarize yourself with different mixed methods, designs, and approaches, there's a really nice the NIH has best practices for mixed methods research in the health sciences online. It's a little older now, but it's really a great resource. And then work that anything with Palinkas in it as an author is always a good source. And so this is another one. And these are just, again, some preliminary considerations, kind of the what in preparing to do a mixed methods design, what do you need to start thinking about? It does require extra resources, time, and you have to have a crystal clear rationale for why you're using mixed methods, because it is a lot more work and a lot more complexity.
So Meredith, a question for you then. So folks may not realize in drug trials, there's a lot of discussion that goes as to what's the primary endpoint, because that's where the statistical alpha is, and a lot of discussion goes on with regulators around what's a clinically meaningful difference, et cetera. So I'm curious, in this context, how are sponsors kind of engaging with you in the selection of the primary versus secondary endpoints? And then how are they thinking about like the statistical significance, power questions that you'd have to, do in another
now in traditional RCID?
So those are great questions. So again, it's the cake has been baked by the time we're at the table. So there's already been some discussion. Again, we're trying to be more and more present and have the opportunity to help to write the protocol so we can have those discussions. But to date, they have come and there's already been discussion, and they've decided what the clinical efficacy or effectiveness and primary endpoint is going to be. And then typically it's the implementation side team can get the remains. They can come in. So it's usually exploratory endpoints, and there is no power, and
So they're powering it on
they're powering it on the
effectiveness point, right? Have some knowledge about.
correct. So that's the determination of the sample size. Correct. So and so it's
So is there an intention then with these trials that they'll end up presenting them to regulators, or is it being more used in a medical affairs way to influence adoption or use of the products?
we try to find out a little bit about that. Yeah. To date, what the most I can find out, again, this is primarily two clients are doing this research. They are using it to prepare for launch or to support uptake post-launch. So it's more about not submitting this. They're registering the trials, but they're not using it for approval or in response to a regulatory query or anything like that.
Are there concerns about these trials? Normally in drug trials, there's a lot of discussion around the safety surveillance. Is there a concern where, oh my gosh, this is out of control and it's going to totally blow up our safety profile? Or is it by the time they're doing these, they have like a really good working knowledge of their safety profile?
I think there's always sensitivity around the safety profile. So I think they not, and the implementation piece of it really doesn't, other than they get worried about the open-ended interview questions. So, but if it's predefined how we're going to report on AEs for that process, that's fine too. And yeah.
Because I've heard that people complain about pragmatic trials for that reason. It's not going to.
You're opening up the box to add more AE reports. Yeah, right. Yeah. I just need to do a time check. I guess we're kind of
We're at end.
Okay. Should I just kind of skip to the very end? I could just skip through here. Okay, I'll take just a few more minutes and wrap it up.
Thank you.
So there's a couple of different approaches to how you think about data integration, mixed methods. You're all made to be familiar. This is a great paper. If you're not, the OCAPAIN paper that talks about 3 different approaches: triangulation, following a thread, and mixed methods matrix. We tend to use number 1. Haven't tried the other 2 yet, but we may. So the triangle, that's thinking about the relationship timing and sequencing between methods. And again, just a couple of other tips. You got to think about how you're going to use the framework before the analysis, create a grid of the constructs and where they're located in the data sources. So really map that out you can map that out ahead of time. Vee's been doing some of that for us. And then the other issue is thinking ahead to what are you going to do if you get discrepant results. So once you have done that, and that's a key thing. You need to think ahead, and here are some options for how to reconcile discrepant findings from this Moffitt article. Here's how we did it in the carousel. I'm not gonna pause because I know we're out of time here. And this is where we originally thought we would map the data into both the EPIS and the Proctor outcomes, but ended up just using the Proctor outcomes, the complexity of adding another framework. So this just shows how we had the data organized by outcomes, and you could see the different types of data sources across the top. Because we had those continuous quality improvement calls, as well as the surveys, the interviews, that was just so much data. And that was really the key takeaway from this study. It's the complexity of wrangling all these different data sources with these large sample sizes. So these were our approach. There are some good, the Cathane article does have some great guidance on the quality indicators for mixed method studies. So here's, again, similar to the other article from the CFR, what it need to think about when you're using mixed methods. And then there is a mixed methods quality reporting checklist that's great to use and can be a very good guide when you're thinking about your own mixed methods approach when you're in the throes of doing your protocol. And so just a couple of bullet points in terms of summary. So we're really seeing use of implementation science during drug development as kind of a nascent area, but really see this as something that's going to be gathering force in the future, not to just a future. More and more of these studies I anticipate. The use of frameworks and other recommended design practices are kind of a work in progress. We see lots of room for improvement, and we're committed in this area, particularly some of the challenges and limitations of conducting hybrid trials are that we're facing are similar to what's being seen more broadly in the implementation research field today. So that was kind of reassuring, especially regarding the use of frameworks. and then there's some really unique complexities when working with sponsors and third-party things. So I just want to shout out to the our effort here that we did together in creating a quality reporting framework for drug safety programs. This is something that was just done, and thanks to colleagues here for all that input. And just also a plug for, we do have a consortium on implementation science, models, methods, and measures in drug and device development. This is really intended as a forum to keep exchange of information about new research methods and results, and network among the growing number of implementation science professionals that there are in industry, as well as academia and government. And then we have topic-specific working groups to develop manuscripts, webinars, and white papers. So if you'd like to join, there's the email address, cis@evadera.com, and we welcome anyone's involvement. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.